Let's begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm hoping you can hear me well. And we're happy to have you here. Appreciate you taking the time to join this talk. Before we begin, we're going to take a moment to reflect on the land that we are on and its history. We acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are most grateful and respectful for the use of this land. It is my pleasure today to introduce our speaker for today's session, Dr. Krishnaswamy Sankaran. Dr. Sankaran advises governments, corporate boards, and institutional investors on high-stake transformation at the nexus of technology, sustainability, and value creation. With over 20 years of global leadership, from EY partner to private equity portfolio architect, he turns complex challenges like AI adoption, decarbonization, and geopolitical risk into strategic advantage. The session today is about how geopolitical shifts are redrawing the map of where and how value is created, protected, and exited in tech-intensive sectors. We will keep this session more conversational, and the real value will come from you. So you're highly encouraged to keep your cameras on and interact during the session. I would like to thank everyone who sent in their questions prior to the session. And for everyone else, please feel free to raise your hand or put your questions or comments in the chat throughout the session as you wish. Thank you for joining today, Dr. Sankaran. We are excited to learn from your journey and experiences. Please take it away.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, Shaka. And as she was mentioning, if you can keep the session as lively as possible, it'll be very helpful because I don't want this to become a kind of a monologue. So keep your cameras on if you can. If you are not in a comfortable situation where your cameras should be kept off, totally fine. Totally respect your privacy. But if you can, keep it on, do so that we can have more of a kind of open discussion and understand where we come from. So this particular talk, I don't know, when I was planning this talk, I planned it in such a way that it has to make sense and meaning for you as a member of this risk community. But surprisingly, it became even more um, relevant and timely, given what your Prime Minister Carney was talking about tech sovereignty and technology. Recently, he was giving a big talk about it and where Canada wants to go. I'm talking about Canada, where you are based. So I thought this would be a relevant topic, not just from the point of view of time, but also where the world is going forward and how we can really benefit from it, given the fact that you're already part of the risk community, right? So I prepared 4 or 5 decks, not just for the sake of showing you some, discussions, but to go deeper into it in 3 aspects. So this topic, as I said, it's from dependence to sovereignty, and and this is a very important theme of today, and how industries are building. When I say industries, you can also juxtapose how nations are building resilient tech ecosystems and what it means for you as a student of risk, a student of insurance, student of understanding the overall ecosystem on what you can do better, right? So with that background, let me share the screen. So is it visible for you? Tell me if it is visible. Is it okay?
Yes, we can
You
see
can
it.
see it now.
Okay. I'll make it full screen. Is it better now?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So as the topic says, from dependence to sovereignty, how industries are building resilient tech ecosystems and why your biggest risk is geopolitical. A bit of background. As Vishaka was pointing out, I come from a industrial background. I worked several years in the industry before going into consulting and advisory. Currently, I advise governments and also companies at more strategic level on the deep tech topics, on mergers, acquisitions, value chain, and so on. You can look it up from my LinkedIn page more about what we are doing. Okay, let me go into the first slide. So for each topic, each of these slides, I wanted to start with a hook. What I mean by a hook is a scenario, what is developing, and an example of the scenario, what I wanted to share. And within this hook and scenario, I wanted to talk about three aspects: the risk aspect, the insurance aspect, and the strategy aspect. Okay. So the first slide talks about the geopolitical risk is now a systemic technology risk. I was talking to a central banker today, and we were discussing about where the things are going in terms of economics and how the economics is playing. And he mentioned economics is fundamentally politics in play. When you look at economics as a value-driven, pure value science, it's not no longer the case, and it has never been the case. It's political science at the end of the day, right? So the hook here is when a government bans a chip, grounds a software system or a platform, or seizes a data center, the entire industry doesn't just slow down, they completely stop. This is not anymore a hypothetical scenario, right? The US China tech rivalry is something that we are seeing. Semiconductor exports controls are being put in place. Data localization mandates have become fundamentally an important aspect of technology supply chain. And industry, for what does it mean for industry? Industry that is building on these kind of things, there's no more the case of borderless tech stacks. There is a new class of risk that is coming into play. And that class of risk is what I call it as geotechnology risk. Why it is new? Because it is not a pure political risk. It is not a pure technological operational risk. It is lying in between. It captures neither of them completely, but it's in between. So it's a new kind of risk. And what does it mean? The risk is acute because of its velocity. What does it mean by velocity? From day one to day two, there can be sanctions, there can be export bans, and everything can happen within days, leaving no time for companies and countries to respond, right? So if you look at it from that point of view, the risk aspect is there is no single vendor dependencies for foreign controlled clouds or chips or whatever technology we are talking about. And the old standard of ERM, what does it mean by ERM? Enterprise Resource Management Framework, is not sufficient. We need to look at it from a different point of view, right? That is a risk aspect. What does it look? How does it look from an insurance point of view? Today, companies have no coverage on this kind of risk. So there is a major gap between the risks the companies are accumulating, also countries are accumulating, and the coverage they can buy today. So there is a huge gap. So new product gap is there, sovereign tech liability, digital supply chain disruption, political risks, going into cybersecurity. Cyber risks are well understood, but still it's evolving space. So from a strategy point of view, what we are looking for, as I'm talking to governments, as I'm talking to companies at board level, we are looking at a new avenue, what we call it as technology sovereignty audit. It maps the critical processes, its technology dependencies, and how does it evolve geopolitically, right? So that's the first part. The second part is dependence is not efficient, it's fragile. What I mean by that is, let me start with the hook here. The hook is the logic of globalization, what the entire global nations were following, told us that concentration creates efficiency. The last decade has taught us that concentration creates brittleness, fragility. That brittleness has a price. Okay, that's a hook here. For decades, we understood industries optimize their technology supply chains for cost, capability, dependence on handful amount of hyperscalers or cloud providers, few semiconductor fabs, for example, TSMC in Taiwan, a small cluster of AI platform vendors. This delivered extraordinary efficiency gains, which is true. We have seen that. But it has also created extraordinary fragility. COVID era, we saw it. The chip shortage exposed how a single bottleneck, for example, in Taiwan, semiconductor fabs in Taiwan, could cripple not just automotive, medical devices, or defense sector, but simultaneously affecting multiple sectors. So the lesson for risk professionals, efficiency metrics now must be paired with resilience metric, right? So when we look at it from a risk point of view, vendor concentration in any tech stack, it's invisible single point of failure. When you look at it from a supply chain point of view, yes, yeah, okay, we understand supply chain, we create multiple dependencies, but from a tech stack, we are still at a very early stage. We have a huge amount of dependencies that are concentrated, and these are largely uninsured. And from a traditional insurance point of view, business interruption insurance does not cover this kind of denials to a foreign controlled digital platforms, an enormous coverage gap. And this is one of the things what one has to look into. And the strategy, what we are looking at it is how can we adopt multi-cloud architecture, sovereign cloud, open sources, resilience in repricing risk, not as a retreat from efficiency, but understanding how we can, look at it from a point of view of resilience building. So the third one is the race to sovereignty. Every country is talking about it. Few years ago, it was India, which was talking about it quite strongly. China did it quite strategically. So I'm not here to say which country is doing what, which is correct, which is wrong. I think every country should operate in its own self-interest, right? And I'm a great proponent of that self-interest. And in that sense, what India is doing, what China is doing, what US is doing, if it protects the self-interest of the nation, that is what every nation state should do. But that being said, we should also understand what is the lesson one can learn, how one can protect what is good for their country, who is winning here. And I have made the case for Canada here because your York University is in Canada and your RISC Institute is part of the York University, which is focusing on Canada. So, and the timely discussion, what is going on with your Prime Minister talking about tech sovereignty, what Canada should do. Particularly, he was talking today about the defense sector and the aerospace sector. But I think I wanted to extend it to deep tech also, because that's where the biggest challenges are. So the global race to tech sovereignty is accelerating at a phase which has not been seen before. For example, EU, European Union, the organization where I was working before, I was part of it, and now I'm advising them on a couple of projects, especially in the critical element strategy, in the technology strategy, in the AI strategy. If you see, they have come up with huge investment promises. 200 companies have come on EU's Eurostack, where they are trying to build end-to-end digital infrastructure. NVIDIA, which is one of the powerhouse, they have seen an upsurge of 20 billion USD in sovereign AI data chip sales projected for 2025. That is 100% year-on-year growth. And we are also seeing it in Middle East, Saudi Arabia, for example. They have come with this humane, which is human-centered commitment towards domestic AI infrastructure. And for Canada, particularly, and I'm making the case for Canada because of the relevance of the institute, whose tech sector is deeply integrated with US-based hyperscalers. Passive dependence is becoming an asymmetric risk. Asymmetric, not in favor of Canada, as US threats technology as a national security instrument. So again, here what US does for them is in their self-interest is right, and they should do that. But how can every country can protect it? So That's what my thought about here. So from a risk point of view, it is regulatory fragmentation, diverging data residency laws, AI governance laws, export controls will increase essentially the compliance cost, operational complexity. We are seeing that more and more across sectors, finance, health, energy, defense, quite a lot of areas are happening in this way. From an insurance point of view, I said there is a major gap here. The regulatory divergence is a very important aspect. Emerging risk drivers for global insurance, they have to do their due diligence. D&O liability, fines, cross-border liability, they are all evolving as we are talking about. So strategy here is we need to engage with federal, provincial sovereignty initiatives. We have seen that quite a lot in Canada case. Um, I would welcome a lot of conversation in this direction. Also post this talk, if we can have some conversation in that area. How can we create multi-jurisdictional tech resilience plan? Exposure to various exposure to different countries, US particularly. And here I'm not advocating what is right for what a country is doing is right or wrong. Every country should act in their own self-interest, but what can we learn and how we can work together to understand this going forward. And the fourth topic is deep tech as a new strategical moat. uh, and the new risk frontiers what we are talking about, right? So the hook here is AI, quantum computing, advanced semiconductors are not just technology products, they are geopolitical instruments. The nation that control them, they will shape the rules, rightfully so, right? It's again, who is right, who is wrong. I'm not here to advocate this. It is the nation who controls uh, these technological frontiers. They are the one who make the rules, and those that don't have to follow them, right? So deep technology, what I mean by that is artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced semiconductors, biotechnology, has become the defining area of 21st century strategic competition. So it's very important to know that. So governments are increasingly treating these technologies as dual use assets. It's very important to know that. So what I mean by dual use assets is capabilities with simultaneous commercial at the same time of national security volume. Not always defense, but national security. It's a new frontier of risk measurement that every country should do. US is greatly doing it. India is greatly doing it. China is greatly doing it. And the second tier countries, when I say second tier countries, these are the middle uh, powers. How can they do that, right? When I say middle powers, countries like Canada, what can they do better? And for industries, the implications are very profound. And my focus is on industry. So, what I mean by very profound, the deep tech capabilities they rely on for competitive advantage are increasingly subject to geopolitical interventions. It might affect your revenue. It can affect your margin. It can affect your you know um, cash flow. So it's very important that you need to understand you are not just talking about products anymore. They are geopolitical instruments. So even if you have a market to sell, you can't sell because of the geopolitical bans and sanctions and so on and so forth. From a risk point of view, what does it mean? Dual use techs create a regulatory action risk. AI data, infrastructure, biotechnology, all those things can be caught in cross-border restrictions overnight, not just in 6 months from now or 1 year from now. It can happen from day to day too. We are seeing that happening. And with IP exposed to forced disclosure, this is also something we should look into. From an insurance point of view, cyber is well known, but what are the aspects of E&O, professional liability must evolve for dual use risk, AI governance failure? How can, as a risk professional, you can take this into account? The strategy is treat domestic deep tech investment as strategic hedge. So technology, strategic portfolio management. This is very important. You have to think about how do you really combine technology with strategy, techno strategy, and analogous to diversified portfolio, financial portfolio management. And the other point is from risk management to resilience by design. So the hook here is old models was build and then insure, right? So we were looking at models where we build first and then insure. So the new model must be designed for resilience. So the first approach is how do you inbuild resilience in the design and then insure against residual risk. The order of operation has changed totally, right? So what does it mean from the point of view of risk? Borders that fail to treat geopolitical risks as a strategic priority is going to face compounding exposure. This is very important. So one has to think in terms of risk compounding. How does it work? Not just from an operational point of view, but also from a regulatory point of view, from a reputational point of view, financial point of view, and so on, right? For insurances, it's very important. Insurers are uniquely positioned to catalyze resilience standards. This is very important. Many companies are coming to terms with it, looking at it from a new business opportunity, pricing geopolitical tech risk accurately, incentivizing sovereignty investments through premium structures. Uh, how can one make geopolitically aware vendor selection, technology sovereignty, and so on? Strategy is companies that transform geopolitical risk awareness into advantage to their strength, to their core moat. They have a sovereign ecosystem, deep tech partnership that can be a part of their core competency. And they will define the next decade. And as I said, it's the rules are made by those who have the power to control these things. Okay. So with that in the background, I wanted to leave a central question, and I'm more happy to discuss this in a more of a dialogue. Are you pricing it correctly, ensuring it appropriately, building the resilience to turn geopolitical risk into advantage? So we have looked at it from a point of view of systemic risk. We have looked at it from a point of view of fragility, what was working as a strength and efficiency before, which is the core concentration of all the technologies and supply chain, has become also a point of, and there is a sovereign race that is going on. How can we look at technology sovereignty as our core competence? And that's how every country should do, not just superpowers, but also the middle powers. And how can we create deep tech moat? What I meant by moat here is not just from the point of view of technology and its ability, but these are all geopolitical instruments going forward. And one has to build the resilience by design, and we can't leave it for chances to apply. With that, I stop here and I will go out and we can have more of a dialogue if that is okay.
Do we have any questions or comments? Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Okay, yes, we do have a lot of questions in the forum. I just wanted to double check if anyone here has any other comments. But okay, if not, I'll just go through the list of questions that you guys sent before. So, Dr. Sankaran, the first question we have is someone says we have spent decades making supply chains as fast and global as possible. Now that countries are prioritizing tech sovereignty, how do companies stay that agile without getting caught in the crossfire of local political shifts?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, fortunately or unfortunately, you are in the middle of this race, whatever you call it, right? You're not just producing technology products, you're
Mhm.
also creating valuable geopolitical instruments for countries where you are based. So, as somebody who is looking at it from a point of view of uh, um, an SME or an industry, obviously you will be confronting these challenges, either from a supply side or also from the from the market side. There's always going to be geopolitical tension. One of the things what you need to understand is understand regulatory reforms that are coming and be aware of those challenges and regulatory changes that are coming well in advance. Work with a proper audit of your sovereignty in terms of tech dependency and also from a point of view of collaborations, right? So if you see many of the countries, what they are doing is they are doing three, many of the companies that are doing three things. One, if you can create the moat within, reduce as much as possible the dependency, then it's already good, right? One thing is that you have to reduce as much as the dependency as possible. But of course, you can't reinvent the wheel and do everything on your own. Wherever you can't do that, you need to create strategic partnership. So, what I mean by strategic partnership is these are built on trust. One has to build it on trust. It's not something you do it just for the sake of doing it, but it has to be built on trust. And many companies are doing it in collaboration with partner countries. So there's a lot of discussions around it. And third one is to create new instruments for collaboration. So let me take the example of Canada, right? Canada has pushed its collaboration one step further with European Union on the SAFE initiative. It's called SAFE. It's a European uh, access point for strategic investments in technologies. Um, it's an initiative created by European Union, and Canada is willfully going there and collaborating with them. So, like that, countries will collaborate. When countries collaborate, if your headquarters is there, obviously you are part of it. And what we are seeing is both good and bad. We are going away from unipolar to multipolar ecosystem. So when you are in a multipolar ecosystem, you obviously need to position your operations, your supply chain, your value chain, and your collaboration in line with the in line with the multipolar ecosystem. So that will help you to avoid that risk. I think I answered it, but there's obviously more to it. I'm happy to discuss that further. Next question.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, the next question is how should insurers adjust their risk models when geopolitical shocks happen in sequences instead of as single events?
Yeah. So there's always this black swan event, right? And this black swan events are happening obviously more often than before. So we are seeing extraordinary events happening, uh, you know, pretty quickly. Take the case of NATO, right? Everybody said NATO is rock solid, but now everything is happening, questioning how NATO is going to evolve, how NATO countries are going to work together. And there is a case in point. Again, I'm not here to advocate what each country is doing is right or wrong. And I have said my point very clearly. What every country is doing is right for them, and that's how it should be, right? So what US does, what Canada does, what European Union does, what India is doing, it's all good in their reference point. And more so, we are going to see that in geopolitics, there is no permanent friends and there is no permanent enemies. You know, things are evolving rapidly. And as individuals, we are embedded in this ecosystem, right? So for us, we have to understand how we can work together in this ecosystem. And at the same time, for companies and for insurances particularly, they are still they are still getting to terms with what is happening. There is a huge gap between what they are selling as a product, what I mentioned to you, and their clients who are insuring for some risks. There is a huge gap, and the gap is evolving. And for a lot of insurances, there is a huge opportunity to understand how one can price resilience into their products. How can they price geopolitical risk into their products? This is very important. And this is also a question for institutions like yours. We are doing a lot of work in the space. While I was with the World Economic Forum, I was the head of the business sector engagement, where I was working on the global risk report between 2011 and 2014. And global risk report is one of the flagship reports that looks into risks from a multiple point of view, predominantly five: geopolitics, technology, environment, social, and economics. So there's a lot to do, and I think for insurances, this is an era of a great opportunity and an era of a lot of landmines that you have to avoid you know falling prey to. So a lot can be done, and we are doing it, and I'm happy to talk more deeper in these topics. But I think in the view of the time, I think what is important is there is a gap. There is definitely a gap. One has to understand how one can do it, and the way forward to it is for each of the companies that the insurers are providing their insurance coverage. One has to start with a new reference point, what I am calling it as sovereignty audit, right? Tech sovereignty audit. And this is new, completely new. And we are pioneering in this space. We are pushing this idea forward. We are doing a lot of work with various countries and governments. And for those people in your group who are interested in this domain, who wanted to talk about it, happy, they can reach out to us. Next question.
Yes. What would you say is one of the biggest gap in government data handling? What sort of skills are needed to solve this gap?
Government data handling. What do you mean, right? Yeah. So see, I think data security and data privacy is something many countries are completely oblivion to. They don't have any clue about it. Obviously, the big powers and the middle powers understand it. Even if you go to many countries in the developing world, you know, like in Africa or in Latin America, and also in the middle power worlds, right? India or China, for example, there's so much gaps in data security and data privacy. There's so much one has to understand what is out there, what are the potential risks to it. So government data handling, there is a huge gap there, right? Somebody is getting to benefit from it. Somebody has to pay the cost for it, right? So who is going to benefit from it? Who is going to pay the cost for it is the question here, right? Especially in the health sector, there's huge market for knowing what is going on in individual health. What can one, what they can do with that data. Obviously you can do an aggregation of the data, but still aggregated data is so valuable. And countries are coming to terms with it. So government data handling, in my opinion, has to really go forward, and there is a huge opportunity for individuals like you guys to come up with new frameworks, come up with new methodologies. And again, what works in one country is not guaranteed to work in another country. My experience of working a lot of years in African countries, thinking that Europe knows better, gone wrong. What works in Europe might not work in Africa, might not work in even in Canada, right? So one has to understand the cultural dimension. One has to understand the regulatory and legal dimension of the country where you're operating, and one has to improve it on a strategic level. So I wouldn't say one country knows it better and they can teach other country. No, completely wrong. Obviously, there are some bottlenecks one has to avoid, or risks and challenges one has to overcome. But again, one has to contextualize it. There's huge gap in the data, you know, and many countries, not just developing countries, even the developed countries, there is so much of data mishandling happening. And I don't want to name one country and not name other, not just for being politically correct, but there's so much of gap. But people are coming to terms with it because the data is power. Today, the next generation of big challenges is data. Right? Data is going to be the energy. It's not just uh, data; it's also the information that one can access and how one can use that information to make strategic moves. So to answer it long, that is my answer. Short is privacy, security is where I see a lot of gap.
Right. The next question is, how is geopolitics affecting tech strategy, and what risk do you think companies are underestimating the most?
I think that the entire discussion was an answer to that question, right? So I have covered it quite a bit.
Mhm.
So tech strategy has to now come to terms with geopolitics. You are not alone. You are not a company that is producing a product and selling. You are producing a geopolitical instrument at the end of the day, especially if you are in the deep tech space. Imagine that you have uh, vaccine and you control the vaccine. You can, right? Geopolitics has gone so much, and COVID has shown that. And I mean, many of you, many of us, uh, we are seeing a world how things changed in COVID times. We lived with masks, we lived with, as if in an alien world. I don't know how it was in Canada. I could imagine how it was here in Europe, in Switzerland particularly. We lived in a like in a war zone, right? So and how things are happening in the space. Technology is is power. Technology is, at the end of the day, geopolitical strength, and and we have to take that into account. And I think the entire discussion was it. And I'm happy that we chose this topic to discuss because it's timely. As I said, your prime minister was talking about it as well, just 1 or 2 days before.
Right. Do you think the shift from technological dependence to sovereignty signals the end of globalization?
See, globalization, as we know, as I said, it's already gone, right? It powered the world, and it is rightful. It's not that I'm favoring one versus the other. I think what is happening right now is we are going through a cycle, right? A cycle where uh, we are becoming multipolar today, and rightfully so. And every country wants to handle their foreign affairs not in terms of I am subservient to you or you are subservient to me. Rather, we are talking about we are equal partners. Okay. But for that, you need to have to talk from a point of strength. I always say this, you can't negotiate from a point of weakness. You have to negotiate from a point of strength, right? Be it from crossing the road to making huge geopolitical decisions. You in your traffic point, a person on a bigger vehicle or bigger, you might see it in your day-to-day life. So I think from a point of view of globalization, we will see partnership building up rather soon, and we are seeing it. And what we assumed as friends forever are changing, right? We are seeing that more and more so. And in this kind of situation, one has to understand how can we be agile? How can we be resilient to changes? So from a point of view of dependency, how can we create partnership? Three things: build it on your own, then you're more sovereign. If you can't build it, partner, right? You have to partner not with one but with multiple things. right? So from that point of view, the globalization as we know today is definitely, it's not changing, it's already changed. We are already in it. We are seeing it. We will see more of trade barriers. We will see more of travel barriers. We will see more of employment barriers. Okay. Old school thought of, hey, I finished this, I get a visa, I can work there. No, it changed. And many of the dreams of people who have come from one place to another is changing. What does it make? What does it mean for individuals? I think it is good. Only rough oceans create great sailors. You can't be saying that, I'm a great sailor. I have never seen a storm. I have never seen, tsunami. Sorry, you have to confront this, and it makes you strong. And I want to quote here my favorite Western philosopher, because my favorite philosophers are mostly Eastern, but one of my Western philosophers is Nietzsche. He said, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So, and it is a very apt saying today. You need to be resilient. You need to build that resilience. So, from the point of view of that particular terminology of being in a globalized world, the definition of globalization is changing. It is more about partnership. We are in a world of partnerships. We are in a world of multipolar partnerships. And it's good. And I think it's good. It will create a lot of um, unforeseen collaborations. It will create, it will test the trust aspect, you know, who are your real friends, who are your so-called friends. Things will evolve and we will see that more. And as individuals, for you guys, this is great. This is great. And we live in a world where we are confronting. We are in rough oceans, good, but we are not left alone. We have right instruments to follow.
Right, for sure. Before we go into next few questions that are mostly focused on early career, does anyone in the meeting have any questions or comments? I see a few of you smiling, nodding. Would you like to say anything? Yeah, Navjot, please go ahead.
Hi.
Put your cameras on so that I can see who is asking the question.
Hi. My name is Navjot. So resilience has been mentioned like several times. I just want to ask you, how would you define the metric? Like, how would companies measure resilience in concrete ways?
Yeah. See, I was one of the core group members of what we called as Risk Resilience Network, which was created while I was leading uh, some of the activities as a head of the business sector engagement. Um, so what we started doing exactly is the question, what is resilience, right? So one of the thing is, what I say is, it's not your ability to avoid risk, but it is your ability to rebound after the risk has been happened. In other words, it's not just your ability, mark my word, it's not just your ability to avoid a risk, it's your ability to get up and stand up in a way you can be functional operationally, right? What does it mean? It could mean on three levels: financial exposure, technological exposure, and the third thing is what I call it as strategic exposure. So a company or a country can pass on one metric, but not simultaneously on all three metrics. So again, it's not just your ability to avoid the risk, it's your ability to get up functionally, and one has to come up with terms specific to that industry what you're in. But squarely, they fall into these three categories: financial, technological, and strategic. Obviously, there are certain tactical things, operational things one can measure. But it's not sufficient to just measure the tactical aspect because one has to think about it from a medium and long term. So that's how one do that. And for example, from a supply chain point of view, I can give you an example. What if your only supplier is going to not supply to you anymore? How quickly can you find another supplier? For many companies, can you guess how many days or weeks? It could be years before they can qualify a supplier. Because some of the industries, they have a long time to qualify somebody to supply critical parts. I will give you a concrete example. In power generation, okay, you have a turbine where you create electrical energy, power from whatever means. Could be nuclear, it could be solar, it could be anything like power generation, wind or not solar, it's wind or nuclear or hydro, whatever means, or gas, for example. The turbine is the very core part. Inside the turbine are going to be a lot of parts. Some of the parts are what we call it as strategic parts. Some of the parts are secondary parts, and third one are commodities. Commodities, you can easily find it anywhere. If it is not from, let's say, from China, it could be from India, it could be from, Vietnam, it could go. But strategic parts are normally going to be in one place. One of the strategic part is the core rotor blade or rotor windings. These rotor windings have very strict specs and risks. One has to qualify this over a period of months and years before you can say, yes, I can qualify this supplier. It's about the quality, the purity, the strength, and strength not just from the point of view of mechanical strength. It's also about electrical strength, how much of potential it can take, how much of breakage it can take. So there's a lot of factors. I don't want to go into technicalities. So it takes so much time for one to say, I have a second supplier, third supplier, right? So in the olden days, people said, okay, I'm going to develop one core, two core suppliers and go forward with that. But that's no longer the case. You need to have, uh, even before the scenario like that happened, I have seen companies that are dependent on one single supplier. Suddenly the supplier has become bankrupt. It's a completely different risk, not the kind of risk what we are talking about. To go from that stage to another stage, it's so difficult. So from a resilience point of view, these are the things that you need to take into account. How can you come quickly to operation? What are the metrics what one has to look into? And they are very specific. Time to recover is one quality, alternative selection process, how long it's going to take. What are the aspects of, what can I do for the cash flow risk? How long can I survive without this things? So there's a lot of metrics. At the end of the day, it's all about the time to recover. How do you define it? Goes along those three aspects. What are those three aspects? Financial, technological, and strategic.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
William,
William?
Well, I just want to say, I know there's a lot of changes happening in the world, and it's understandable to me that the small countries have to really think about themselves in that sense. But for me, I think if America and Canada become less individualistic and more nationalist and more inward looking and less open to immigrants, I think that would be a betrayal of what Canada and the United States were supposed to be. I can understand not every country is supposed to be that, but for Canada, I certainly hope to retain our more individualistic or global character. And more broadly, I think that positive sum games are the goal of life. So I sincerely hope we can avoid trying to play zero-sum games, which I think more often than not end up negative sum.
I think yours is more of a comment, right? So there's,
More of a
I mean,
comment.
yeah. So I think what made Canada what it is what made US what it is. I mean, again, I'm speaking in terms of two countries where I am a little bit far away from, but I'm working a lot with them. Uh, as I said, what brought them to what they are today is exactly the opposite of what they are doing today, right? So being more open, more the idea of American dream or Canadian dream, however you call it, it's all built, and the countries are built by immigrants, and rightfully so. Vishaka started with a statement. This is the land of people, which is completely different, and there's a lot of immigrants coming in, which took a different stake. So again, um, I'm not here to say what is right and what is wrong. We have to understand that we are in a new equation, and this new equation, whether we like it or not, we are part and parcel of it. I mean, obviously, we can say, yes, hey, this is not what is right, this is not what is good. Let's be more collaborative. Let's be more, build on what brought us what here. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and things are changing. And even in Europe, it's changing. Today there is a news that says Germany and France are not collaborating as they should. You know, I mean, obviously, these two countries were arch rivals. If you go back to history, uh, you know, and today, after post World War II, they have become so solidified and they were working together. And suddenly we are in a state where they are not doing good and they are not working together. I think it's about human tendency, William, in my opinion. When things become scarce, the intentions change. It's the aspect of scarcity. I think it's driving a lot of challenges today. I think if a country is self-sufficient and has a lot of things to do within themselves, things might be different, right? Now things are scarce. They are seeing the core of the issue is around access to resources. Who controls the resources? Who dominates the resources? And there is a lot of, I mean, one can argue back and forth what is going on, and I'm here not to support one versus the other. But what I can tell you is every country should have its own sovereign interest, and this sovereign interest should be protected. And when it is not, it is the one who controls, they shape the rules. And here we cannot talk about an altruistic thought process. When somebody is more powerful, who can set the narrative, tell a lie, or tell a tell a thing which is completely different to what you are experiencing or I am experiencing, things change. And yeah, so again, I'm here to say I'm not here to advocate one country versus the other. In my opinion, every country should work and operate on their own self-interest. So from that point of view, what US is doing, what Canada should do, or what Europe should do, should be lined with their self-interest, and rightfully so.
Yeah, we only have 5 minutes left. Okay, I see another hand. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, since like the middle and smaller powers, like they need to partner with like a larger one, like do they even have a choice in like building resilient systems? Because like I feel like if the US wants to like you were saying, like the more dominant ones will set the rules, right? So like if the US does want to dominate, like does Canada even have a chance, for instance, to like not be like subservient?
Yeah. While I'm answering that question, Vishaka, if we want to take another 10 minutes more, it's totally fine for me. So we don't need to, it's good conversation. So going back to Redovan, see, I think is your question that if US is dominating the narrative, should Canada be subservient, right? So that's your question.
It's not should they be subservient, it's like do they even have a choice of not like following the US?
Yeah. See, this is again, it's about believing a scenario to hold waters forever, right?
Hmm.
I'll give you a completely different theme or scenario.
Yeah.
Swiss franc was pegged against euro
Hmm.
for a very long period, right?
Okay.
And especially between 20, 2011 to 2015, everybody thought Swiss franc is pegged against euro and everything will go fine. So every time Swiss franc became stronger than euro by 1.2 for every uh, euro 1.2 Swiss francs. So Swiss francs will kind of weaken itself by printing money and making
Mm.
sure that this balance is maintained. Every central bank followed it. European Union understood this is how it should be. Everybody understood. And what happened was, I'm just picking names. Navjot would have bought her first house in, Romania, and thinking like, I'm going to take a loan, and let me take a loan in Swiss francs, not in the local currency, because it's a strong currency. It's a very fixed currency. The interest rate is going to be almost very low. Today, the interest rate in Switzerland is close to zero, the reference rate, or negative, even negative. So everybody took loans. Everybody, Vishaka would have taken it, or Justice would have taken his loan or built a house. Everything was working fine until January 15th, 2015. I think it's January 15th. Correct me if I'm wrong. January 15th, 2015. Suddenly, the Swiss bank, central bank, came and said, "We are taking out the peg." What led them to that is a different story. But they just said, "Sorry." Everything collapsed. Companies lost in millions, hundreds of millions. People who have got their houses lost their loan, could not afford a house. They have to give back. So many things
Mm.
happen. So the question now is, did they have a choice? Yes, they had a choice. But they believed in a narrative, thinking that this narrative is going to be forever. Right? So building on a narrative that is going to be forever is not to be taken at a face value. What should have Canada done, or what should any country do? You know, to plan for this narrative or this scenario well in advance. Okay, now we are learning it.
Mhm.
We learned a lesson post World War II, and this was holding waters for such a long time, right?
Okay.
And now we are learning a new lesson. We will adapt. And then comes a new phase where we have to learn one more lesson. So I think these are opportunities where countries are realizing, oh, sorry, I should have made a different choices. So
Mm.
can they deal this in a different way? I think they are doing it. Canada, for the question was about Canada. So
Yeah.
for example, they are strategically partnering with Europe. As I said, there is a SAFE program which they are partnering with. They are betting on Europe. They are partnering with China. You might have seen they are working with China. They are partnering with India. So there is a lot of movement towards multipolar governance. I think the
Mm.
bet is multipolar, right? And that's an immediate choice, if not any country. So can they deal from a point of strength? Yes. The strength is multipolarism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd love to discuss it further, but I think like let's go for the other questions.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, if not, and since we're okay for another few minutes, I'll just quickly ask a early career question, and then Dr. Sankaran, keep it as long and short as convenient for you. So, students are asking for students in still early in their careers or still graduating, what skills or mindset do you think will be most valuable as these industries become more affected by geopolitical changes?
See, first of all, as I understood correctly, you are all students of um, subject matter which is related to risks and insurance, correct? If I'm right, right?
Yeah, for the most
I
part.
Or
graduated.
most. Okay, good. So I think
It's grads or undergrads, masters, it's that
okay.
cohort.
See, I think what is important is, as I said, fortunately or unfortunately, you are part of this ecosystem. William was saying about world should not go in this direction, but unfortunately, we are in this direction. but you should take this as an opportunity to expand your skill sets. You should take this opportunity to collaborate and learn topics. I can tell you for sure, the next 5 years is going to be a very important period. And you can say this for about everything and anything, any period you take, next 5 years would be good. But the quantity of change that you're going to see in the next 5 years is going to shape how the next 15, 20 years are going to form. Especially for those people who are coming from Africa and Latin America and Asia, I think this is a period of great, great development. Okay. You have immense potential to collaborate using your ethnical background or your linguistical background or your racial background. There's so much one can do in these countries. The biggest growth, in my opinion, is going to be in these pillars. Africa, I'm betting a lot on Africa, because I think African nationalism is something I'm very, very happy to see. They are rebounding from colonial mindset and going into sovereignty, and many countries are rightfully doing it. But obviously, there are pockets where still there's a lot of geopolitical tensions, wars, religious tensions, so on and so forth. Uh, but there's so much of growth happening there. And Latin America also, I don't know if there are people from Latin American countries here in this call. So, so as a student of risks, insurance, and strategy, I think what you should do is use this opportunity to collaborate cross-border. Work on topics. If you have specific interest in these domains, as I said before, reach out to us, reach out to me. I do, have time to time I write about these topics. This particular topic we are working on it very strategically. So that's why I thought it will be good. So there's so much one can do and learn. And for you, if you can combine this with certain industry specific knowledge, then it's really strong. So strategy, risk, and insurance is horizontal. But if you can pair it with certain industries, one or two good industries, whether it is healthcare, defense, or energy, there's so much one can do to actually put that into practice. And I think more and more what is happening is the role of AI and deep tech is something that you should become more and more familiar with. It's not something you can do away. You need to work with these skill sets, and how can you use and incorporate technology the right way so that you can equip yourself to offer value. I think the future is for those people who can create value. What I mean by value is a value that is for the company to make money. At the end of the day, that's what it is. If you can create value to companies to benefit from your skill sets to create economic value, you will always be a demand. And one has to look at it from that point of view. What are the tools you can learn? What are the technologies you can learn? How can you differentiate yourself from the market space? There's so much you can do. And collaboration is a way to go. It's not about it's not about just knowledge, it's about application of that knowledge. If you look at it from an example point of view, most of the AI engines, the companies which control these engines, they don't make money. But if you have a use case on the AI which can create value to your company, there you make so much money. There are use case companies that are no longer being seen as a AI company, they make money. If you're, for example, healthcare provider who can analyze your data, who can analyze the data of the clients, who can build services using AI that can be of helpful for the healthcare providence, what you're doing, you can make money. But as such, you are not an AI company. You are a healthcare provider, but you use the technology in a very powerful way. So AI, in my opinion, is something that you have to integrate into your skill set in a use case point of view. So I would say for you as an undergrad or a grad student, I think that's very important. And as a researcher, as a PhD student, as professors, I don't know how many of them are faculties who are here in this call, I think it's important is to build good white papers, research papers that really go in that direction.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for staying a few minutes over. If you still have any more questions that you would like for Dr. Sankaran to answer, please feel free to reach out to him directly via LinkedIn and continue the conversation. And thank you, Dr. Sankaran, so much for joining today and delivering such an insightful and engaging session. It was truly valuable, and I'm confident all of our participants took away a lot from your perspectives and expertise. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to share your work. Thank you for being a part of today's event. We very much look forward to welcome you back for future events.
Thank you. And I have one last point to mention as we are all there. I think it's important that if you have any specific questions, if you have any specific thought process around the topic what we have discussed today, two things. One, send me your questions, comments directly on the post what Vishaka or the team has posted, so we can keep that as a thread and follow it through. So I think one common place where we can build a good thread of conversation, that's one thing. So it's not sporadically posted everywhere. Second thing is each of the thematic is of great interest for us. If you are specifically interested, you can think about doing some kind of work collaboratively. And another topic is if your faculty group, Vishaka, this is for your faculty group who are here or who are not here, you tell them if there is real interest in this thematic. We are working with government level, and for Canada, it is a very important time, and it's very important phase of their growth. We can obviously discuss. And also for people from China, from Africa, if you have contacts or if you have worked with governments, feel free to connect. We can obviously have a conversation more in deeper. And also people from India, obviously I'm working a lot with Indian government and also a lot of other governments. So feel free to reach out. And again, you are for whatever reason, you are in a very, very unique topic. This is a topic that will have a lot of influence and impact. And I wish you all a very good success, and feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining today. Yeah, if we don't have any last comments, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care, everyone.